So 20,193. That number is not only the number of people that fit in Madison Square Garden, it's also the number of strangers that we've interacted with on the course of a very odd adventure over the past 6 years. And I'll get to these 20,000 strangers in a minute, but first, the elephant in the room. What is up with these guys? These guys are a performance art duo called the Bumbys. This is Gil Bumby in the American flag bandana. And that's Jill Bumby over there in the red wig. The handsome Latin man over there is Jose. He, along with a few other people like myself, communicate on behalf of the Bumbys because they don't speak. Now, you might be thinking, these guys don't speak, they hide their identities, and they wear weird outfits. But what do? What the Bumbys do is provide stories called a fair and honest appraisal of your appearance for anyone that might be brave enough to stand in front of them, any stranger that's willing to be in front of them. And these appraisals, they're not critical report cards. They're a fun story that playfully describes how you're perceived by the world. And in writing these stories for people all around the world, we've learned a lot of things. But before I get to talking about that, I should explain how this all came together, because it's a pretty weird story. A trip down Bumby Lane. Gil Bumby over here, 6 years ago, he found himself to be pretty uninspired and bored. And the reason is that following his years in college, he was in a really successful band, and he'd worked as a lyricist. Now, it's pretty hard to make it as an artist, especially in your mid-20s and especially in New York. But on top of that, the economy crashed. And like so many other people, he had to go out there and he had to get a more practical job. Now, he was lucky to get a job, and he knows that. But it just wasn't his thing. He was working on Wall Street, I believe, like in finance. And he was like, what? Yeah. I guess he kind of dresses that way still. But this wasn't for him, and he found himself getting bored. And now, as you guys know, boredom can be one of the worst feelings you can possibly have. And he found himself to be going crazy. I mean, he was literally starting to go crazy. And that turned out to be a good thing, because it forced him to do something crazy. Now, as for what he decided to do, I can't explain the inspiration for it, because he's a pretty crazy artist guy. But I knew that he'd always been into observing people. So what he decided to do was to take a mask, a typewriter, and a cardboard sign written in Sharpie that said, "A fair and honest appraisal of your appearance, $2. And this is a picture of him. The first day he did this on Bedford Avenue in Brooklyn. Represent BK. And he clearly needed an image consultant, but we'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, he went on the street to do this. Now, New Yorkers, as some of you guys might know, are super immune to weirdos on the street. So it took a little while, but more and more people came up to him cautiously, and they wanted to know what he had to say about them. After doing this for about 2 or 3 hours, he checked his pockets, and he was like, whoa, I have 170 bucks. Now, that might not be the most money, but for an artist in your mid-20s, it was a really cool thing. So he decided that the experiment was a success. He went on to keep doing this. He performed again on Bedford Avenue, in the subway. One of the earlier speakers showed a picture of Union Square. He performed there, and he actually got a ticket for not having a permit. While he was doing all these crazy hijinks in New York, I was in LA, and I was working on the corporate side of the entertainment industry. Honestly, I was kind of bored as well. We had a lot of mutual friends, and they connected us. He called me up, and he told me about this weird street art experiment of his. I'd never heard of anything like it. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I also thought we should do something bigger with it, and wilder and crazier. So we decided to partner up and bolster each other's strengths. He was the writer, I was kind of the voice and MC, because as I mentioned, he doesn't speak. So now when somebody had a question or wanted to maybe book him, there was somebody that could actually answer instead of just getting a shrug back. And now, you're probably wondering where this young lady came from. One day, he was doing his thing, and he actually appraised her. Now, through some crazy detective work, she managed to track him down, told him that she wanted to do this. He was a bit hesitant at first, but he auditioned her, and she passed with flying colors. So now Gil Bumby had a Jill Bumby, whatever that means. Now, with the two of them and the addition of two additional folks that play the kind of MC and spokesperson role, like Jose and myself, we kind of have the world's weirdest band. And adding Jill, it added a feminine voice and it brought balance to the project. Some elements of the project, like adding Jill, we had control over. Others were just honestly sheer luck. One such example, one day they were doing their thing, performing. This kind of eccentric, older-looking lady came up to him, and he wrote to her, "You look like the cool aunt that would help me sneak out of a family reunion and take me to my first concert." She thought that was really rad, and it turns out she wasn't just some eccentric older lady. She was a big art curator, and she gave him his first booking off the street and set him up in an art gallery like this. Now, planned occurrences and freak occurrences, they combined to take us from a little street project into an international performance art brand. We've had a lot of adventures along the way, and we've learned a lot of lessons. And I'll tell you about that in a minute, but for now, I thought it'd be fun to show you guys what we do live. So I'd love to put Niall on the spot, actually. And let's pick somebody else from the audience. If Jose will go grab somebody.
If we could grab, yeah, come on up. What's your name? Mary. You're gonna stand there, you're gonna smile, or not, and they're gonna type. That's it.
Super complicated. All right, so while these guys are getting their appraisals, I wanna share the first appraisal that I ever got with you guys. So, the first day we met Jill, she came out and she wrote one for me. All she knew about me was that I was from LA, and I was coming out to New York to help them with their first big gig at Fashion Week, and this is what she wrote. Well. I didn't expect you to be so LA. It's like you were born to drive a golf cart and escort Bill Murray to the set, but then got so big that you started your own jam, and suddenly Naomi can't even get you on the phone, much less throw one at you. I'm so punk that I typed this right off the table. And so, like, this thing was really funny, and I deserved the LA comment for wearing sunglasses indoors and doing silly stuff that I thought was cool when I was in my mid-20s. But this card actually really touched me, and I was like, wow, I'm not supposed to drive someone around in a golf cart. I'm supposed to do something bigger. I'm supposed to start my own jam. I'm gonna go do that. And I make it sound like it was relatively easy, but it was a crazy process. You should have seen my dad's look on his face when I told him I was gonna leave a job at Paramount Pictures with health benefits to go out and tour the world with two mass weirdos. He had a pretty funny look on his face, and hi, Dad. So, what do we do now? What do we do next? We figured we wanted to make this a long-term and sustainable project, not a short-term trend. So we figured we needed two things. One, people crave feedback. Even the most humble and the most modest of us, we all want to know how we're perceived by others. And we felt like we could provide better content for people than their friends or their families even could, because we didn't have to cross those unwritten lines of friendship. A psychologist friend of mine actually told me that he believes he can give his patients the best diagnosis the first time he meets them before any relationship or connection exists between them that can cloud his judgment. I found that to be pretty interesting, and I thought it relates to what we do. So one, everyone craves feedback. Two, we figured that people expect to be torn apart by strangers. I don't even need to explain this one. Just go look at your local newsstand. I don't know about your guys' newsstands, but mine is filled with gossip rags and tabloids and just all sorts of negativity. We figured if we could flip the script on this expectation, we'd add an element of surprise to the project, which would add more kind of long-term sustainability. It turns out we were totally right. From the first time that we performed at a big gig, we'd have these crazy lines, and we still do. It's insane. On an average gig, we have like a 40-minute line. And people would want to hear what we had to say about them, but no matter how many gigs we've done or how much press we've gotten, people always come up and they ask if we're going to be mean. And they expect some sort of report card or critical judgment. That's not what we're about. We're not into negativity. We think that's easy. What we're into is cool, positive affirmations, things more like this. This is an appraisal that Jill wrote for a girl named Claire. Once again, never met this person. It was a random event for a jeans company. She told her that it looked like she was obviously a model. Now, that was true. Not the craziest guess, because she was pretty gorgeous. But the interesting part was that she said, I want to hear what you have to say. Now, this was interesting because it turns out Claire was actually an up-and-coming blogger. What we found is that strangers aren't all that scary. All of us feel nervous in social situations from time to time because we aren't sure if we're going to be good enough or cool enough. And anxiety, that's not something that's unique to any of us. We all have fear. We want to protect ourselves, but it's interesting and ironic that conversely, we all want to connect with people, which forces you to be vulnerable. And when I say everyone feels this way, I literally mean everyone. Let's take celebrities, for example. When we first started having to perform at high-profile events, we were pretty nervous about it. The idea of interacting with a huge designer or an actor or a fashion model that we had a crush on or whatever, it was pretty nerve-wracking. But what helped us with that was bring them back down to kind of our level and putting them in front of the Bumbys. We saw that they had the same nervous energy that anyone would. And in fact, a lot of them would come up and ask us if they were going to be mean or they were wondering if we'd like them. And I'd think to myself, dude, why do you even care what we think? You have an Emmy. Like, what? And full disclosure, Aaron Paul was not the person that was nervous. He was actually really cool. And we mainly liked the picture and are huge Breaking Bad fans. So seeing guys like that have the same nervousness and the same tics as, not him, but people in general, the same tics as us, helped us with our confidence, and it also taught us a lot about human interaction and the shared human experience. Looking back on the last 6 years, I can honestly say that we've had one of the craziest adventures ever. I've had the coolest job. I get to travel the world, attend surreal events like this one, and interact with really interesting people. I mean, Tina Fey, that's crazy. The chance for us to even attempt to entertain someone like that who's entertained us so much. And I'm gonna geek out here for a second, but we're sharing a stage with Nile Rodgers. This is a true story. 1 year ago, I was sitting in front of my computer geeking out at a video of him talking about how cool it was to work with Daft Punk. Anyway, so while I was talking about Nile, I'd like to put him back on the spot and our other guests, and I'd love to hear what the Bumbys had to say about them. Do you mind reading your card? Mind sharing?
Dude. I should probably stop there. Somebody needs to write a Wikipedia page that lists all the people you haven't worked with rather than the people you have worked with. It'd be shorter. You don't need to tell, I don't need to tell you what the world looks like from the top, but you seem like the sort who'd play off his Olympian stature with, hey, what are you gonna do? But you have climbed every mountain, so it's time for you to take up a new challenge. I say, go back to school and get your CPA. Not because you need the money, because you need the challenge. This time, next year, you'll be the world's greatest accountant. You can co-write Pharrell's next hit and then charge him to do his taxes.
Yeah, can you read yours?
Well, look at you. If I was a young adult writer, I would have you be my main character. You'd be this plucky misfit who would spend half her time in the library learning how to float pencils with her supernatural powers, but you'd also be the rad bassist in a band that does Led Zeppelin covers but also dresses in goth all black. You're quirky and eccentric, but totally lovable, even if your humor is a little wry and dry at times. I have to say, you saved the day while shredding some outright awesome tunes and getting the lead out. Rock on, gold, dust woman. Overall rating 9.8.
Thank you, guys.